in going back and talking about the Tlingit Indian tribe, just to recap, remember that they're the tribe that lives closest to where we do. They live kind of over on the coast by Seattle, almost up in the Canada area there. And they were close to the ocean. And because they were close to the ocean and they were close to forests, they had all the food they wanted to eat. They didn't have to grow gardens. They could gather berries at any at any point, and well, any season, of course. And they could have all the fish they wanted. They had all of the forest animals to eat. So eating was not a problem with this tribe. Whereas for some tribes, eating was a problem. They just to gather enough food to keep their bodies going was difficult, but not for this tribe. And salmon was their favorite thing. They could catch enough salmon in a short amount of time that would last them almost a whole year. And they would dry it and kind of smoke it, kind of so to speak, and you could keep it for months. You can maybe keep it even a year. Maybe you could keep it longer than that. So the salmon was the most important food. But one of the things that they really loved was a little fish. He was about that big. He was called a candlefish, and he was full of oil. I don't mean his tummy was full of oil, but I do mean that his skin was full of oil. He had a fatty layer under his skin, under his scales, and so they would take the candlefish and they would heat it in a pan or a pot or whatever they had, and it would drip, and it would drip this oil. And pretty soon they'd have, quite a bit, maybe a couple tablespoons of oil. And they would keep this oil in little cedar boxes that were very well built. And they would use this oil for eating. They would use it for their wounds. They would wipe it on them for a protection against insects. Candlefish oil was it was important to them. But the funny thing was, it's not just that they ate it and they used it, but they also kept it, because whoever had the most candlefish oil seemed to be the richest. And so when the natives would get together, they compare, okay, well, I've got this, I've got that. Well, I've got 12 boxes of candlefish oil. Well, that's nothing. I've got 12 boxes of candlefish oil left over from last year, plus the stuff I gathered this year, On and on it goes. Because to this tribe, getting wealthy was what it was all about. Their necessities of life were already provided by the Creator, of course. And so their thoughts went to a pride issue, and they just thought that getting rich and showing off was better, and that was what they wanted to do. And so they spent much of their life trying to outdo the next family next that lived next to them. They believed, of course, in spirits because they didn't know the one true God. But one of the spirits they believed in was the spirit of the water. And they felt that if you had your house, that if your house faced the ocean, that you were going to get some kind of I guess the word is blessing. I don't know if that's the right word, but you would be more powerful. And so they built their houses, and they were built out of logs, like cedar houses, and they were all the houses would face the ocean. And because if you could see the ocean, then you had this certain power, and it was like, I don't know. Anyway, something like that. So all their houses faced the ocean. If they could possibly get their houses to look at the water, that was the best. And so they were all built out of logs, but they all faced the ocean. One of the things that they did like to build was on page 44. You can see a picture of a totem. And a totem was kind of like a sign pole. In other words, it was telling you about your family. So I don't know if I've heard a lot of stories about whether they worshipped it, or I don't know if they did or they didn't. But if you were very fancy and very rich, you had a totem, and this totem was carved. And of course, the carving tools were rather rude. They weren't, or crude, maybe that's the right word. They weren't like a chainsaw and some really skillful knives. They were bones and rocks and that kind of thing, and maybe some burning that went on as well. But they would carve a statue, kind of, and they would make it a story of your family. So they would have maybe twin bears at the bottom because this father had two sons, and then they would have the great bear over him, and maybe they would have an eagle on top of that, and maybe they would have the great hawk, or maybe they'd have the face of a wolf. It was kind of like your family tree, so to speak, and then they would put it outside their home. And of course they had log cabins kind of idea, and they would put it, and if you had a very large totem, it was like, oh, well, you were so wealthy and you were so rich, and oh, that is just awesome because you could afford this totem. Whereas you've had just small totem, well, okay, it's all right, but it's better than no totem, but it's not quite as good. So you can see totem poles all across this Northwest, and today they probably have stand for nothing, but back in the day, in the Indians' day, they stood for their family, kind of like their family heritage. Let me read that to you. I'm reading on page 44. The Tlingit families had cedar boxes in which they stored things. The boxes were so well made that oil could be kept in them. In front of many houses, Tlingit houses, were huge carved poles called totem poles. A totem is a symbol that stands for a tribe, a family, or a person. It's usually an animal. A totem pole was a kind of signboard that told about a person's family. Only a very rich person could afford to have a small totem at the front of the house. Small totem poles were used to honor the dead or to mark graves. So a totem was a big deal. Today we can make big, tall totem poles because we have the technology, we have the tools and the skills to do that. But back in this day, just a small totem was showed that you had some kind of greatness, some kind of importance. So as you see the next totem pole, you remember this Tlingit tribe. And then there's one more thing in this tribe. Once in a lifetime, they would have a thing called a potlatch. And a potlatch was a party, and it lasted for 10 days. And this tribe would invite other tribes, maybe other peoples from a similar tribe would come. And the chief it would be a lavish, if that's the right word in the Indian language. It would be a big affair, like the biggest party you can imagine. Any party that lasts 10 days is pretty good size anyway. And they would eat food, and they would, play their music and do their dancing and talk and probably play games if you were kids. But the interesting thing about their potlatch was that the chief who gave the potlatch in the first place would give a present to everybody. So if you were invited, you got a present. Which is kind of funny because, well, it'd be like you having a birthday party, and instead of everybody bringing you a birthday present, you would give everybody else a birthday present. And so that's kind of like this. Everyone got a present, and the presents were things like maybe moccasins, maybe blankets, that kind of thing. And the chief would spend a lifetime gaining this stuff in order to give it away, just to show that he was rich and he could afford that. And then the weird thing is remember that the candlefish oil that's sitting in those boxes? He would take the candlefish oil and he would throw it on the fire, and the fire would blaze up, and the people would say, oh, look how rich he is. He is so rich that he can throw away his candlefish oil, and it doesn't even matter. Oh, he is so wealthy. It would be like us in today, taking $20 bills and thinking, well, hey, I'm going to show my friend how rich I am. I'm going to take my $10, $20 bills and throw them in the fire and have them all burn up. And you say, whoa, oh, it doesn't make any difference. I have more money where that came from. It's okay. Man, I didn't know he had that much money. Okay, that's today's version. But it's exactly what happened in the Indian version. The chief poured the candlefish oil, and after the party was over and everybody went home, the chief had nothing. He'd burned up his candlefish oil because of pride, because he wanted to show everybody how rich he was. He gave away everything he maybe worked years in preparing, their blankets and the moccasins and whatever else he gave away. He worked for, a long time to get all that. And once the party was over, after the 10-day feast, everyone went home, and the chief was left, never being able to give 2 potlatches in a life, just 1 potlatch, because he'd given everything up. And so he had to all start over clear from the bottom and take some more candlefish and get more candlefish oil, which was not easy to do. So isn't that kind of a funny story, isn't it? All right. So you can go ahead, and after you listen to this tape and yesterday's tape, you can go, or sorry, they're not tapes, but a taped session, and then you can take your quiz, your Tlingit Indian quiz, and then we've got a couple more things to talk about, our Indians. Okay, bye-bye.